Hello and welcome to the Good Old Days, our program focusing on the history of Raynham. Our host is retired Selectman Don McKinnon, and our special guest today is Liz Moura from the Council on Aging, and also a longtime Raynham native. You grew up in Raynham?
I grew up in Raynham on Route 138, yes, which is changed.
Attended the Raynham schools.
I did.
Commercial site in the fashion.
I did. Well,
this is a loan agency now? I don't know what you
I attended Raynham schools. Started in the North School,
which we'll talk a little bit about, right?
That was, you like that little segue?
Yes, right.
Yes.
Getting into it.
Dawn and I think alike, which is rather frightening.
That is frightening.
The North School, I attended the North School with, among other people, Marcia, now Sylvia, used to be Lounsbury, and then went on to the Lily B. Merrill, and what was then the Pleasant Street School, where there was the 8th grade, the 6th, 7th, and 8th
Which
grade.
is now Little Liberty.
Which is now the Little Liberty.
And then did you go to BR?
I went to BR, yes. The old BR.
Yeah.
Everything's new
We're
now,
still
isn't
negotiating
it?
that.
Well, the former BR, the school to be named later.
I know.
Yes.
We'll get back to that
We'll get
someday,
back to that.
too. That's another
This is
story.
a 4-part interview, isn't it?
Pat, would you read, please, for us a...
Absolutely.
This is just to let
The
people
annual
know
Town report.
Liz's roots.
And this was for the year ending December 31st, 1988. And this is a very nice dedication here, as we've read on a number of our shows. And this says, Dear fellow citizens, dedication, this year the Board of Selectmen are honoring 2 fine gentlemen who exemplified the spirit of hard work and cooperation among town employees. These 2 gentlemen, both employed by the Raynham Public Schools until their retirement, were responsible in many ways for the smooth operation of the schools as well as their cleanliness. James S. Moura, which would be Liz's dad, retired custodial and maintenance supervisor, was a 25-year veteran of the school department, having worked from August 1962 to November 1987. Manuel Costa, assistant supervisor of custodial staff, was a 20-year veteran, having started in October 1963 and retired in June of 1983. Jimmy and Manny were men that you could count on to get the job done, whatever it might be. They were always there when you needed them, and always with a smile. The town has always depended on people like Mr. Moura and Mr. Costa, and we thank them for their dependability. They always gave their best to the town, and we wish them the best in their retirement years. Therefore, in honor of their dedication to duty and selfless service to the town, the Board of Selectmen hereby dedicate the 1988 Annual Town Report to James S. Moura and Manuel Costa, and it's signed by Donald Francis, Don McKinnon, and Albert Porter. My goodness. Board of Selectmen, and there's a very nice photo of Mr. Moura and Mr. Costa right there. So.
I brought that in. I've got most of them back to 73 or maybe 68. I'm not sure. You were in the 1st grade when this was dedicated. I know.
I was. Yes, very good, Donald. I'll thank you later. I'll give you money later for that. Yes.
It is my belief that sometimes apples don't fall far from the tree. And Liz developed a work ethic under her parents, mother and father, who both set examples. And just by living the way they lived, I know we used to rely on her dad in time of storm and anything else. I can remember in one of the many building committees I've been on, we had Bridgewater people over there, and they were saying, look at this place, look at how, we don't have that in Bridgewater. And I said, that's right. You don't have that in Bridgewater. Not to put Bridgewater down. Some of our best friends are from Bridgewater.
But you know, it must have started a tradition, Don, because our schools are maintained so well in Raynham.
That's what I mean.
Oh my gosh, but it's continued.
We
have Maria at the Merrill School, and John at the La Liberty, and Peter here, and they just really are so conscientious, and they take such good care of our schools.
Well, I think that what happens too is that I know my dad felt this way, that you feel like you have an ownership. And it's more than just being a resident.
Yep.
You feel like you have an ownership, and you can almost, he would be able to go into a building and almost feel if there was something wrong. Even before the water started flooding in, or something fell or broke or whatever, you would almost have a feeling that there was something. And a building, you know, it's like the building whisperer, I guess. The building talks to you and tells you things. And he used to you know, the way he did things, he found very inventive ways. I mean, a lot of people know my dad, and I remember my dad, and he had a joie de vivre about life. He was a very outgoing and very happy person, a very funny gentleman. And
Positive thinker.
very positive thinker, but he would do things that in the course of his, you want to talk about, well, we'll talk about history now, right? He would do things like he would be concerned that the toilets weren't being cleaned correctly. And of course, you know, there were well, the North School, the South School, the Center School, the Merrill School, and then the Pleasant Street School, which is now the La Liberty. So there were 5 schools in Bridgewater, Raynham in Bridgewater, Freudian slip, that he had to look, you know, be in charge of. And so he would be in the school like for example, the junior high, and he would go in with an indelible pen, and he would lean over the toilet, and he would make a mark where you couldn't see it. And he would make a mark. Now, if you went in and cleaned correctly, the mark would be gone.
Oh my God.
So, and he would be in there like 5 o'clock in the morning doing this, and he would do it, and he wouldn't tell anybody, and you never knew where it was going to be. And so then some of the guys would come in, and the night crew would come in, and he would go and check this particular area, and if he found the mark, he would say, this was his famous thing. He would go, and he'd point, and they'd look over, and they'd say, oh. And they never knew when he was going to do it. And he was just a stickler for the building being cleaned and for doing the job right and doing the job correctly. And he always believed once you did the job right and correctly, it became second nature, and so it became easier.
See, when you interview people for jobs, you never know when you're going to find a person like your dad, though. That's the key to it. And when I look around, not to pick on communities, but I always say one of the major problems of some communities the word is maintenance. And if you can keep, I look at Taunton High School, and there was a wing that was the same age as St. Mary's. Well, St. Mary's is right down the street is still active because they maintain St. Mary's. And Taunton High now is part of the Morton Hospital. It gutted it.
Well, preventative maintenance, it's the key to so many things. Because, and you know, the funny thing is that you know, and not to cast aspersions on anybody ever, but you know that in your own home. You know, you do that at home.
That's right.
And some people don't translate that
into the place they work.
Yeah, into the place they work or the building they're in, and it's something that, you know, you just if your roof is leaking at home, you do something about your roof. If something is broken, you fix it. And I think that's just something that, you know, again,
and this is why, and we'll touch just on the North School to touch on it because we mentioned it because you're a veteran of the North School. But when you go to what we call the 3 schools, that would be the Center, the South, and the North. Those
were the 3 small schools.
The small schools where little children went to, you know. And based on the maintenance of it, though, you go to many of these other towns, those schools are gone, or they're just abandoned there and no use for them whatsoever. So in the South School now, we will have the cable moving over to that.
Oh, are you moving the entire?
Not the studio, but the entire mechanism of the cable. We have a youth center over at the South School. And at the Center School, of course, we have the town hall now, which is an immaculate building. And now to the North School, I'm making my latest pitch, will be, I would recommend storage because they're running out of it, believe it or not. We have storage in the town hall, but it's just utilized and then some. And also for the historical, and when I say historical, I'm meaning not only history museum type, but also, Pat, you had mentioned some other things that people may do in that building where I would also like to see people of a creative nature working in there and development. And because you can, as much as we found fault in the North School, there was a professional school there prior to us bad-mouthing it. Because there were people paying, I don't know what they paid, $10,000 or $12,000 a year to go to that school. They're down in Middleborough. I don't know how they're doing now, but there was a private school there. So all of that has to do with maintenance. But now that I've burnt maintenance into the ground, apologize to you and your family, you are here today basically to explain the senior centers.
Okay.
And you came originally from the town of Bridgewater,
Yes.
where we have cultivated many people. People don't remember how many people we've brought over from Bridgewater. And I'd like you just to go into a little bit, if you could, as to your job now, what it was before when you were in Bridgewater, what it is now, and the growth potential
Okay.
of that job.
Well, I'm director of the Council on Aging in Raynham, and I'm based at the Senior Center in Raynham, 2215 King Philip Street. And I came to Raynham 3 years ago in March. I have been assistant director in Bridgewater for, I think, 10 years. I had been a clerk for 3 years before that. And I got laid off. And I was unemployed for a while. And then Joyce, my predecessor in Raynham, Joyce Roderick, became quite ill and had to retire. And so therefore the position opened up, and I applied for it. And you know, coming over with 13 years of experience at the Bridgewater Senior Center. And again, the difference between us is that the Bridgewater Senior Center is a much bigger building. The function room is probably more than twice the size of the function room we have in Raynham.
Been to meetings in Bridgewater.
Yeah, it's
That's
a very
large
and
room.
it's a very large room. It has three dividing
it's
doors.
bigger than the town hall's meeting room, I believe.
It is, yes, and it has 3 dividing doors, so you can make separate areas to have different programs in. And I came over to Raynham 3 years ago, and you know, basically helped to put in some programs and help plan for the future. Because the future is changing. You know, I don't know the exact figure right now. I was going to look at it before I came here and forgot. I think it's 4,437, but I'm not sure the exact figure. It's over 4,400. There are 4,400 people in Raynham, age 55 and up. That's a huge number. That's a really huge number. When you consider the population of Raynham is about 13,500 in that neighborhood,
right.
That's a very large percentage of the population. And what
was that number again?
4,400.
4,400.
Yeah, 55 and
Four
up.
is a 12.
And the biggest.
So it's a third of the
third, yeah.
population.
Yeah. And
Is that more than most communities in Massachusetts?
Well, what you're finding if you look at the statistics from other communities, many of the cities in Massachusetts are losing population.
No.
They don't have as many older people in there, but the rural areas, more rural areas, have huge populations. There's some towns in, if we look at the state reports on cities and towns and the elderly population, there are some rural areas where 80% of the population
Really?
is over 55.
Wow.
And I mean very small communities. So a third is you know, right around the average
Yeah.
for cities and towns, and it's the baby boomer generation, of course. And what I found when Marcia Sylvia gave me the statistics on population was the group from 55 to 70 is the biggest chunk of that. It's over, well over 1,000 people, I think it's about 1,500, is in that area. And so what becomes a very interesting plan for the future is, I guess I should preface this by saying about 15 years ago we were at a meeting, the COA in Bridgewater, and we were, Merrill Emma, who's Ron Emma's former wife, ex-wife, she was the chairman of the COA in Bridgewater, and we were sitting there trying to plan what we were going to have for entertainment at a party. And, you know, we were thinking of what kind of band we were going to bring in, and in a lull in the conversation, we were all laughing, somebody said, who do you think we're going to want when we're that age? And we were all in our 30s or 40s at that point, and somebody said, Bruce Springsteen, and everybody laughed. Well, that story stuck with me.
Yeah.
Because if you're 60 years old now, or you're 55 years old now, you like a certain type of music. And beyond that, you've worked with computers probably most of your working adult life. You are very conversant with iPhones and iPads and smartphones and your computer and your laptop.
So you're
and
dealing with a totally different
you're
population,
dealing with
same age group, but they're
Yeah.
totally different.
It
And many of
The
them
baby
really
boomers are
active, too.
creating
Well,
something different than in the market.
Well, I think the other thing is too is that imagine if you look at an old movie from the 1930s, you see somebody 60 years old. You know, they had a shawl on and they
Oh,
were
yeah.
they were toddling
Barry
around. You know?
Fitzgerald was, I'm sure, 20 years younger than me.
But yeah,
Yeah.
and here we are, you know,
Yeah.
I'm going to be 60 next year. You know, should I make it? I'm going to be 60 next year. And I don't feel 60. I don't know what 60 is. 60 has changed the perception of what 60 is. So how do you deal with that? How do you plan for that? What are people going to want in the future? And something that happened very recently that had never happened before. Peggy Evers, our outreach worker, helps people with Medicare. Helps people when they turn 65 to sign up for Medicare, to understand
And that's
what
a
it
wonderful
means.
service.
And it's a wonderful service. But for the first time ever, we had somebody call up and say, you know, my wife and I are going to be turning 65. We need to find out about this. And called back the next day and said, you know, we went on their website and we researched it and everything. We're okay now. We're going to be fine. And then a few weeks later, somebody else called. And it was the same thing. And so that had never happened before. And
So the current elders are myself excluded, computer savvy.
computer savvy. And
Oh, that's
that group
I'm
that
glad somebody is.
But yeah, come to my computer class, you'll love it. But I think
Do you have it?
I
No.
gave a private computer
You did.
class
She did
to
give
in
me
my office.
You know.
Remember
how many
that?
yeah, but Liz, you don't know the person who didn't give me a computer. I've had computer lessons from a multitude of people. I forgot it all.
You took notes and you kept nodding.
I know, and I lost
You
the
kept
notes and the whole
nodding.
thing. Well, when's your next class? Well, anyway.
That's my next class.
I'll get
You
back
kept
to it.
nodding like you knew what I was telling you.
I know. I do fake it. Yeah.
But so things are really changing in terms of, and the idea of computers and the example of computers is just part of it. What are people going to be interested in the future? What are they going to need, if anything? You know, I mean, are people going to be so self-assured and educated that that the entire makeup of what a council on aging and a senior center is going to change? It's
Do you
a brave
think
new
that
world.
65 now, that couple that called, may have more use for the service of the town when they're, say, 75?
Yeah,
So,
good
you
point.
know, if I'm 80,
'Cause now
I
you
feel
have-
60.
right.
They might,
When
but-
you're 60, you're going to feel 40. And we're 10 to 20 years younger now based on our parent experience.
But I think that's why it's important to blend services and recreation and information, so that when we have services like the Medicare or like, you know, with Shine counselors, or beyond that, fuel assistance or programs like that, and then, you know, two of the things we really firmly believe in are health, regarding physical health and mental health. With Dr. Terry Ruby, we have many programs where, in fact, we do one every winter, where we talk about winter blues, we talk about the holidays, we talk about, you know, and there again is something else that's we're seeing for the first time in the last few years. We're seeing it that didn't happen before. Used to be you would give a program on mental health, and either nobody would turn up, or a few people would turn up and just be sitting there rigid, listening. Now you give a program on mental health, and between 15 and 30 people will show up. They ask questions, and then they go up to Dr. Ruby afterward and say, you know, this is what I feel, this is what I've been, what's been happening to me, and there's this you know, feeling that mental health, which is what we encourage, mental health is, you know, you go to your doctor if your blood pressure's high. Why wouldn't you go to a therapist if you're having problems? If you know, you're depressed.
Well, this
if
is
you're
what you
having
run
anxiety.
into the problem with the veterans now. Many of them come in from the war, let's just say, and they have wounds, and that's treated. But then they come in, they don't have anything you can see, but they need
And the suicide
help.
rate is incredibly high.
It's
incredibly
dramatically high, the suicide rate. So that's the same with us. Now, I'm going to give you the $64 question because you know I careful.
Oh, here.
Well, no, because there was one time we were planning on doing that, and all of a sudden it went on the back burner. Should we enlarge the size of the senior center?
You expect I would say no to that?
I'm asking you not only to say
Well,
yes.
yeah.
I always know the answer.
Okay, well, that's why you asked
Well,
the
I don't know,
question.
so, yeah.
That's why you asked the question.
But in what way? In other words, I know at the time we were doing it, we were thinking of the kitchen.
Right.
That the kitchen
That
was too
definitely,
small.
yeah.
So now the question is, Liz, what must we do in the next, let's just say 10 years to give it a picture? Enlarge, A, the kitchen, B, the meeting room, C, because you people meet in a room that other people freeload on you too. They come in and use your meeting room to meet. And including the finance committee, who's the people who tell
Well,
you
we're
what
not
you're
there
going to
either.
spend.
We're not there
No,
at
no,
that time,
no.
so.
Oh, I'm saying they freeload.
I didn't say that. He said that.
I can say that about
He says that he
finance
doesn't have to
committee.
run anymore for anything, so he can say these things. The finance committee, you can meet anytime you want.
Never say never. I'm taking out
But-
papers.
Okay, before we get into more trouble, should I answer
Yeah,
that question?
sure.
Okay. You're asking me if I think the senior center should be expanded? Yes.
Yeah, and
I mean,
how, in what way?
In what way?
In
Like I've never thought of it, right, Don? And I didn't tell him to ask me. This.
No, no, you
We
didn't.
never talked about this.
Oh, but you know me.
I think that, yes, the senior center should be expanded, and yes, definitely the kitchen. And I'll tell you something, when I came to Raynham, one of the things that sort of disappointed me, I'll admit it, sort of disappointed me about the senior center was the size of the kitchen. Because I came from a building that had a restaurant-sized kitchen with 2 restaurant stoves, with gas stoves, with big ovens, and a center island in the, and I'm not saying it was a perfect kitchen, it was still kind of small,
Yeah.
with a center island, and you know, it could use more counter space. I had a side-by-side refrigerator, freezer, big, you know, freezer, and a separate little freezer over there, and we were able to make meals there. We were able 3 days a week to have congregate lunches.
And now, of course, it's about the size of a closet.
Your home. It's the size of your home kitchen. Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
If you
it's
have
the
a
size-
small one.
If you have a, yeah.
A small
if
kitchen.
you have, if
you
yeah.
come from a small home.
If you came from a very small home. Thank God I'm a tiny person, because otherwise I wouldn't fit in the
But see,
kitchen.
the irony is, and of course, no one in Bridgewater thinks I say nice things about them, but I do. And one of them is the talent that comes over, by the way, from Bridgewater. But somewhere along, and I said this to Alan Chalker just the other night, he and I were talking, you know, and I said, you know, what is it about Bridgewater, though? Because I'm going to be honest with you, Alan, some of you people are nuts as far as I'm concerned. But yet you have the seed of talent that is just exemplary. And I said Alan's one of them, and the Flynn boys are elderly now. But you know, yet they built a senior center that is, of course, with half their size. There's our disclaimer. But yet, how did they do? Were you around when they were planning that?
No, I wasn't.
Because it's a beautiful
It
building.
predated me. Yeah, it really is, and it's a large
Somebody
building set
had
off the
the
road.
seed of some-
Well,
see, this is what they are in
It was
Bridgewater.
Chauncey Cole and Fred Yaten. Chauncey Cole and Fred Yaten. And in fact, it's now called the Cole Yaten Senior Center in Bridgewater.
I think
they
Yaten
were
was
very-
the uncle of Flynn,
I
I
think so.
believe.
He
think
might have
there's
been, I
a
don't know.
relationship in there.
But you know, it was.
But those
Chauncey,
names are familiar
it
to
was,
me.
It was Chauncey and Fred who were the catalyst to so much of that, and you know, and I knew both of them. I knew Chauncey very well. Chauncey
Is that right? Is he
taught
still
me-
with us?
No, unfortunately,
No, yeah.
they're both gone. But Chauncey taught me a lot about you know, designing a newsletter. He would tell me what fonts to use and what fonts not to use. Until this day, when I do
Yeah.
the Senior Center newsletter, I look at it and I think, okay, 3 different fonts on a page, that's enough. And I think Chauncey comes into my mind every time I do it, because I remember one time I had something, I went wild, and I had something like 5 or 6 different fonts. And he said, "You're using an awful lot of fonts there." And he had given me a program.
Yeah.
He was in his
Yeah.
80s, and he had given me
Yeah.
software to do some different designs and things.
But somewhere along the line, they raised enough at a town meeting to build that building. And
So
they
can I
still
go
have
back
it.
can I go back to the addition on the senior center?
Where are you
on
going to
Raynham?
build it? Where are you going to do that?
Yeah, I want to finish it. You asked the
Okay.
question, I'm going to finish it.
Well, I try not to give
So
you
the kitchen,
enough time to answer.
obviously the kitchen, but what I thought was just bump out that end of the building, which I think initially it might have been
Where the
might have been
kitchen is.
plan.
That might have been the
Well,
plan. Go over into the
where
parking
the tree
lot.
line. No, you don't even have to go into the parking lot. You know where the tree line is.
You can go
Bump
to
it
that.
out, bump the side of the
Okay.
building out, and what you would do would you.
You're not
you
near a wetland.
No, you're
Conservation.
not near a wetland. There's a conduit. No, there's a conduit. In fact, there's a parking lot beyond that. There's
Yes,
a
there
lot
is.
of trees in a parking
Yes,
lot
I didn't know if
beyond
there was
that.
a wetland.
No,
though.
no. I think there's a
Okay,
conduit.
high and
down
dry.
there. So you bump it out, and you'd have room for probably 2 small meeting rooms. You could expand the function room, and like in Bridgewater, put in those dividing doors to create
Okay.
three
Yeah.
rooms. So you essentially and
Have
the
different
doors-
meetings at the same
Well,
time.
the doors in Bridgewater were soundproof, so essentially you could have chair yoga and 2 other programs going on at the same time. You'd have a restaurant-sized kitchen, so then you could do meals pretty easily.
Do you have this in writing?
Do I have this in writing? You got a pen? But I think that would be the way to go. And of course,
Yeah.
eventually the parking lot. I mean, you've gone by our building. Our parking lot tends to get really crowded when we have events.
Yes, it does.
So, and
Yes,
the
it
parking
does.
lot eventually would have to be
Thank goodness we
expanded.
got across the street, but yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and so the parking lot eventually would have to be expanded. But something like that, pushing that out and would probably be inadequate, because I don't see a population boom in Raynham.
No. As a matter of fact,
that
the
would be
1/3
adequate.
population we have basically are single-family dwellings, I would say, because the large apartment house, which is now being built in Bridgewater, the schools will be glad to see that, 2 times the size of the ones we have probably. Now, I don't know, is there 2,000 or 3,000 people living in our apartment house, let's say? That does not cater itself to seniors.
But I'll tell you something, a lot of people we've been getting lately, I've had at least 5 different couples come in the last couple of months who have moved in there.
Oh, yeah, but I'm
are
talking
seniors.
2,000 people are there. You got 5,
Yeah.
I mean,
Well, no, I don't know.
Ask Pat
Well,
about
I
how
got
many are
5
coming
in a couple of months,
into
John.
the schools.
You want me
The
to go
chairman
door
will-
to door? I'll knock on the door and find
Chairman.
out, excuse me, are you over 55?
Pat's
I
going to
mean,
jump off the chair in a minute, a number of kids she gets coming in. So that's where what I'm saying is, of the elderly population, most of us are
Probably in
people
single-family
who have
homes, yeah.
lived in here for a long time. There's a couple. There was a fella from Easton who now it's being developed again, by the way, up in off of Pleasant Street, where they have 55 and older.
Oh, Berry Hill?
Berry Hill. But see, that's one of 2. And even then, when they tried to put one on King Street, the neighbors up there fought it. They didn't even want that. And they said, what are you arguing about? But they argue about things. And so therefore, there isn't much for the seniors except mobile home, which is now being competitive with Taunton, Middleborough, and places like that.
Oh,
So there isn't much
Bridgewater
from
also.
there.
Bridgewater
Yeah.
with
And Bridgewater,
High
I'm
Pond,
sorry,
High
yeah.
Pond,
Yeah, the Wyman
Stone
family.
Meadow, yeah.
But you have so many different activities and services going on through the Council on Aging. How would people in the community find out about it? Do you have a phone number, a website? Or
508-824-2740. Dawn just happens to have a copy of the newsletter. You can hold that, Dawn. Thank you.
how
We'll
does
hold it
one get the
together.
newsletter?
They can call us up, we'll mail it out to them, or they can pick it up
Stop
at
by.
the library, stop by, 2215 King Philip Street. Or they can pick it up at our building, they can pick it up at the library.
And on the back, it has a calendar of
calendar.
things they do. So it's beautifully written, by the way.
Thank you.
Not too
Well,
many.
I must say too, Don, you were talking about talent, Bridgewater talent coming over. But in a historical note, prior to Liz being Council on Aging in Bridgewater,
Yeah.
she was the Raynham correspondent for the Enterprise.
And how did you know that?
We're going to have to bring her back, Pat, because we're hardly touching the surface of her
right.
experiences
That's right.
How do you
from
know
the
that, Pat?
I
Enterprise.
happen to follow you in your footsteps.
I was the Enterprise correspondent, and then Pat was the Enterprise correspondent.
something?
Remember that, speaking of computers, remember that computer we used?
Oh my
That old
gosh.
tinny thing that we used? We need another program for this, right?
But you came on board computer-wise, which was very, very important to us in this time. Maybe we can have her back.
I think we need to, Don,
Can we
'cause,
have you
you know,
back?
the
Sure,
time is ticking
sure.
away here.
Yeah, I'd love that.
Even just growing up in Raynham, you
Yeah,
know,
we
how
didn't-
things have changed.
Yeah. You know, and I was thinking that when you and I were talking about the history of Raynham, and I was thinking, I was mentally going up 138 and thinking of Oliver's General Store and Tony Burgess's, Tony just passed away, his place, the the Raynham Market where Landy's is now, and I was thinking
Isn't that something?
of what it was like to grow
Yeah.
up before 495 went in.
So we'll have to set another date.
Yes, we
I
will.
Is that
so.
possible?
Mhm.
That would be
Absolutely.
great.
Mhm.
Thank you
Well,
very much
thank you
for
very
coming. I
much. I've
appreciate
enjoyed
it.
it. Thank you.
Liz Moura, our guest today, and Don McKinnon, our host. We want to thank all of you for being with us as well. We'll see you here on the next episode of The Good Old Days. All right.
Have you got your calendar with you?
If I got my calendar.